In 1924, the SCP Foundation formed a covert special task force, known only to the O5 Council, codenamed the Insurgency. The leadership of the Insurgency was comprised of members of MTF Alpha-1, the Red Right Hand, famed for their loyalty to the O5 Council and the total secrecy of their origins, identities, and operations. The Insurgency leadership was supported by research, security, and retrieval personnel, all taken from Foundation ranks. To the majority of the Foundation and the anomalous world, the Insurgency was a splinter group that went AWOL, with several researchers and anomalous objects. In reality, the O5 Council had created the Insurgency to complete missions with ethically questionable methods and politically unsavory results, while keeping the Foundation's public reputation clean. For approximately 24 years, the Insurgency operated under the guise of Foundation defectors, using anomalous objects to secretly further the goals of the O5 Council. In 1948, as part of a seemingly routine staged operation, the Insurgency removed several SCP objects from Foundation containment and transported dozens of defecting Foundation researchers to various safe locations. The same day, multiple other unplanned raids of Foundation facilities occurred. The Insurgency seized SCP objects with great research and military potential and inflicted severe casualties to Foundation personnel. The Foundation's biggest lie had become a reality. Their covert Black Ops team had defected, and the Foundation faced a new threat from an organization now calling itself by a new name, the Chaos Insurgency. The O5 Council was stunned. The defection, or even the slightest hint of disloyalty from the Red Right Hand personnel, had been unprecedented. The motives behind the Insurgency's betrayal remain unknown to the Foundation. All attempts to find, apprehend, or assassinate the defecting Insurgency operatives failed. This information is classified within the Foundation, which maintained that the Insurgency defected in 1924, and that the actual defections in 1948 were simply raids made by the already existing splinter organization. The modern Chaos Insurgency bears some similarities to the organization that founded it. The Chaos Insurgency's Delta Command, shrouded in mystery, issues orders to the lower ranks. Gamma-class researchers and military commanders have oversight over the execution of Delta Command's orders, while Beta-class personnel, while not given the same level of command as Gamma-class, carry out the Insurgency's work in the field. Alpha-class personnel, often recruited from individuals with little to no knowledge of the anomalous, accept offers of employment, often because the alternative is to carry on in a miserable existence outside the anomalous world. They are the grunt workers, numerous and expendable. The Insurgency is split into two divisions, military and research and development, R&D. Cells within both divisions work independently, unaware of the exact actions and goals of other cells. New recruits receive instructions from their superiors and are expected to follow them unquestioningly, not knowing that every action they take is part of a larger plan orchestrated by Delta Command. They are told that they are carrying out a great rebellion against the anarchy of the status quo, a world where consensus reality is an illusion and history's greatest lie, perpetrated by the Foundation. They are told that they will use the anomalous to build a utopian future, where humanity is master of everything, not just a mirage. But really, who knows what the Chaos Insurgency actually wants? Here are 3 separate SCPs from the Chaos Insurgency. SCP-3033, a human weapon. Object class, Keter. Special containment procedures. SCP-3033-1 and SCP-3033-2 instances should be neutralized on site. Neutralized instances should be recovered and autopsied. Any serial numbers should be recorded for identifying particular production runs of SCP-3033, as well as total units produced. Citing of SCP-3033-1 instances is an orange level threat. Any Foundation sites in the vicinity should prepare for an imminent attack from Chaos Insurgency forces. While engaging SCP-3033-1 instances, the use of large calibers, explosive, and overwhelming force is recommended. See Threat Assessment 3033 for further details. Person of Interest 7701, Madison Craggs, has been taken into custody. She has been granted immunity from prosecution for crimes against humanity in exchange for technical data and future assistance in Chaos Insurgency intelligence reports. Following data has been redacted. E1260 should be kept in protective custody in a standard humanoid containment with entertainment package and treated as a Class 4 captive. E1261 should be kept in an automated humanoid containment unit with access to approved text-based entertainment and a text-based communication link to staff. Under no circumstances should staff ever directly interact with E1261. If E1261 must be removed from containment chamber, she should be rendered unconscious via fentanyl gas and kept comatose until another automated chamber can be provided. Under no circumstances should either E-Class associated with the project become aware of the current state of other E-Class or Person of Interest 7701. Description: SCP-3033-1 refers to individual instances of Chaos Insurgency MIC units. Instances are humans that have received invasive cranial implants that allows rudimentary control of nerve impulses, as well as overriding biological limits. Depending on the production run, implants are placed inside the amygdala, the thalamus, the hypothalamus, prefrontal, and somatosensory cortexes. The implants on SCP-3033-1 instances counteract pain receptors, override standard nervous signals, and interfere with the endocrine system to induce a variety of hormonal responses when activated. The only reliable method of neutralizing instances are exsanguination/shock, anoxia, and severing the nervous connection between the implant and the rest of the body. As a result, instances can withstand significant amounts of bodily trauma before expiring, and are unaffected by morale shocks, but lack fine motor control, training, and the ability to work cohesively. SCP-3033-2 refers to the handlers of SCP-3033-1 units. SCP-3033-2 instances are previously non-anomalous humans that have been augmented with brain-computer interfaces in order to control SCP-3033-1 instances. Research into the mechanism of action of such instances and the SCP-3033-2 apparatuses are ongoing. Interview log 3033-1. Level 4 clearance required. Authenticated. E1260 suffers from persistent migraine headaches. In order to treat this, he has been prescribed a drug regimen of topiramate and timolol. E1260 is also missing his left hand at the wrist. A prosthetic has been provided. Appears to have SCP-3033-2 implants, but has not been directly examined due to patient risk. Oh hey Doc, another interviewer? Dr. Foster. Yes, before we start, taking those meds yet? They working okay? Yeah, actually, I can actually think coherently for more than a half hour at a time. So what's the topic today? Go ahead and start from when you got transferred to the project. Alright, so I had been a subject for a long while. I'm told they run internal lotteries for things like this. They just pulled me from my cell in the middle of the night, packed me into a shipping container with maybe 100 others. Several uncomfortable hours later, we are unloaded in some desert lab. Couldn't tell you where. They sorted us into two groups. I got put in the smaller one, which is generally a good sign. got packed into a classroom, mentioned something about genetic markers and obedience metrics. There was a lady, introduced herself as Dr. Craggs. I'll never forget her. She was very interesting. Spent 3 or so hours lecturing on what the goal was, what she was going to do to the others, and what she was going to do to us. In exquisite detail. What chunks of her brain would be replaced? What would happen? Getting lobotomized? All of this with an oddly giddy tone, like a kid talking about everything in his favorite TV show. Her dedication was admirable, but her ethics were a bit off-kilter. Well, what else do you remember of her? Not a whole lot. She was the overseer for training, but didn't really acknowledge us otherwise. Always talked at, never with. You get me? Yes, continue. Over the next few days, all of us got these. E1260 taps the port on the back of his head. In the back of our heads. They told us that we would be controllers because, as Craig puts it, we had been good little boys and girls. She then said that only 4 of us were necessary. The other 6 would be vivisected for future iterations. We had to demonstrate our ability to control the subjects and get them to accomplish tasks and complete objectives. Don't ask me to explain it. I haven't a bleeding clue how it actually works. The way you got the mics, that's what they're called over there, to do anything was more an art than a science. I couldn't tell you how I got through it. They just did what they were supposed to do. Like clockwork. I was told I passed with flying colors. Went straight into further training, a fine-tuning of sorts. Come to think of it, I was actually treated pretty well. Decent food considering I was a prisoner at one point. Access to books, little bits of conversation. Anyway, at some point, something goes really wrong. Convoy gets hit by some kind of special forces group. I get black bagged and pop up here. That's the whole story. The abridged version, at least. Interesting. You never had any direct interaction with the subjects? The mics? None. They were just husks. Shells. Vehicles requiring a driver. Alright. That's all for now. Interview log 3033-2. Level 4 clearance required. Authenticated. As a result of the SCP-3033-1 implant malfunctioning, visual and audio-based perception of characteristics unique to humans results in excruciating pain. Due to these constraints, E1261 resides in an automated containment unit and communicates with staff via computer link. K. Grimmer. Hey, just checking in for the day. E1261. I'm still around, surviving at least. You mind if we ask a couple of questions? I'll answer what I can. A lot of it unpleasant. I really don't want to think about it. Alright, all of these questions are completely voluntary. You don't have to answer something if you don't want to. What was it like being under the influence of, I think you call it a controller? Yeah, I can talk about that. Natural movement, but not mine, if that makes sense. Interesting. I'm sending a file called alienhandsyndrome.txt. Take a look at it. Does it describe something similar? Okay. Hold on. A bit, I guess. A more extreme version. Total lack of control over everything. Couldn't even resist. Like while watching a videotape, someone else's life in high quality, complete with sounds, smells, taste, touch. I got disconnected from my own life. I was a passenger in my own head, while someone else was driving. The first time, it was just weird. I kind of resigned myself to it. I figured it could be a lot worse. But then, it got worse. Far worse than I can possibly imagine. Can you elaborate further? I can't. I physically can't. Not possible. It reminds me too much of the people. The people? What do you mean? The people I killed. After this, E1261 refused to communicate with staff for 16 days. Interview log 303-3. Level 3 clearance required. Authenticated. Per the terms of her extraction, person of interest 7701 has been provided a small cottage near Site 74, where she resides under house arrest. Hello, Dr. Carlson. Good to see you again. I hope you remember the tape recorder this time? You as well, Dr. Craggs, and it's already recording. I suppose I should start explaining then, right? Dr. Carlson nods. Well, you probably know how it goes. Worked as a wholesome U.S. employee, defected to the Soviets, Soviet Union collapse. Where else is a bioweapons researcher supposed to find meaningful work? Anyway, they brought me in, and I was able to swipe a bunch of old GRU equipment, some of it self-developed, some of it borrowed from other groups. In particular, there's a couple old UK Ministry of Defense prototypes on something they called Blue Falcon in their old rainbow-coded project naming scheme. I had a bit of a laugh at that one, but I didn't think the Brits would use American military slang. But they did. I don't understand. Blue Falcon is a euphemism for buddy fucker. It's the soldier in your platoon or company or whatever that would screw you over in a heartbeat just to get ahead. That's what this Blue Falcon project did, was allowed you to seize control of a person remotely at a range. It seemed like the Limeys were trying to use this to start friendly fire incidents. Person of interest 7701 gestures at her hands as if she had a gun and points it at Dr. Carlson. It was pretty limited. Not a long range, not a long time, but all you needed was maybe 15 seconds. Pop, 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 and 3 of your buddies are down, and you're going to get turned to Swiss cheese. And everyone else was going to be really confused and scared. That's horrifying. There are more issues than that, though. It was bulky, hard to use, caused psychological damage to the operators, didn't always work. A real laundry list of issues. Eventually we scrapped that whole idea. Turns out brains are complicated and hard to manipulate at range. But it did provide a good starting point for the Mike program, which I presume you're actually interested in. Dr. Carlson nods. We decided to abandon the whole friendly fire thing. The range bit was the hardest part. There aren't many good ways to manipulate brains, and most of them require you to be in the meat, or the brains, I suppose. Instead, we decided we could use this as a rudimentary form of mind control. I mean, we already knew the principles and processes, and having a bunch of hardware crammed inside someone's head gave us a lot more control and finesse over what could happen in there, rather than taking figurative pot shots at range. So, I sent this proposal to Delta Command, and they sent me a couple $1,000,000, a lab, and maybe 100 or so live subjects. While that sounds like a lot, it was actually a shoestring budget. I only got maybe a third of what I requested, and they told me to make it happen or I would be the test subject for the next guy. So, first order of business was to design the hardware. We were really breaking new ground. I knew GRUP wasn't doing anything like this, and you guys weren't doing anything like this. I now know that Prometheus Labs didn't get very far. Given that this was something totally new and foreign, there was a lot of trial and error. Fun fact, a lot of brain surgeries often occur while the patient is awake. Brain surgery still isn't super well understood. You need to keep the patient aware of what's going on to make sure that what you're cutting isn't too important. First 15 or so died on the table, and the next 15 ranged from comatose to mentally disabled to paralyzed. After the first 30 or so practice surgeries, to figure out what modules worked and where we could stick hardware without impairing stuff like motor skills, Oh, we started making real progress. Other than a few oopsies here and there, the other 50 we got implanted, we were even able to save most of the prefrontal cortex. In most places. Not that they need it or anything, but once that chip was in, any control they used to have is overridden. The next step was controller. That was pretty straightforward. Just had to find a cooperative test subject, which wasn't too hard. A fairly standard surgery, some implants later, and now he's got a serial port in the back of his head. Plug him into the machine and boom! All of the test subjects can be controlled by our controller. Person of interest 7701 air quotes the word controlled. I say controlled because, as I understand it, it wasn't really direct control. He could give them objectives and designate certain things, but he couldn't make them do anything directly. But hey, not bad for our first try. Can you recall the mechanism of control? Do controllers have to exert willpower, thought? I can't really remember right now. I think some nice scotch and an internet connection might jog my memory, though. We'll take that into consideration. Please continue. So I send my findings back to Delta Command, and they give me a target. First, I'm disappointed. There's so much potential for these guys, clearing minefields, bioweapon dispersal, forced dangerous labor, even plain old distraction. But I read further. It's an old GRU site, run by someone I used to know. Piece of shit named Dmitry Kalasov. GRUP interrogations guy. He kept count of how many bones he broke, but I think it was somewhere in the thousands. Pretty sure he keyed my car. Anyway, he was old and decrepit at that point, in a nice sunset position. Apparently a Chaos Insurgency agent just defected to his site, and they wanted him offed. I saw an opportunity for payback, and I told them I would make an example of them. By God, did we make an example. We put a bunch of extra bells and whistles in these poor sods' head. They're virtually immortal, as long as the implant's intact and the muscles still function. We armed our subjects with some old Soviet equipment, knives, AK-47s, what have you, and sent them on their merry way. That GRU site had maybe 75 security personnel and 100 others. Every one of them died a grisly death. Can you believe they ran old Dimitri through with his own fucking cane? Brutal. Person of interest 7701 walks up to a cabinet and begins digging through files. I think I still have the AAR photos from that one. You want to see? Are they in the official files you gave us? If yes, don't bother. Spoil sport. Anyway, person of interest 7701 checks her watch. Ooh, lunchtime. I guess I'll see you next week? Probably. Not sure if they'll send someone else. Person of interest 7701 shrugs. Try to. That Dr. Foster squirms too much. Interview log 3033-4. Level 4 clearance required. Authenticated. E1261 expressed interest in talking about her time with the Chaos Insurgency that she had previously withheld in prior interviews. K. Grimmer. Are you awake? Some of the other staff told me you're willing to talk more. Now a good time to discuss the CI program? It's never a good time, but I think I am prepared now. I remember a lot more. Where should I start? Go ahead and start from the beginning. The beginning? Sure. Alright, after all the stuff they shoved in my head, a lot of this fuzzy. Born in 1417, in the Hijri calendar, in Gregorian, 1996 to 1997. Somewhere in Pakistan. Not sure where. Lived somewhere near a smaller town. Not too modern, but modern enough. Dad was a grocer. Mom helped him out. Had 3 brothers. I was the youngest. Can't remember any names. Faces even. Just people that existed. Can hardly remember anything of childhood. Clearest memory is day of capture. It was Rajab 24, 1431. July 6th, 2010. I remember that exact date clearly. We were on a trip. Dad always got good lamb from a cousin who worked as a shepherd in the East. He rented a refrigerated truck, drove it all the way back to his store. They never took me before, but my incessant begging had paid off for this year. He always said this journey was no place for girls. It's too dangerous. But he relented. We get held up. Not a big deal. Highwaymen aren't uncommon. Just have to pay a modest fee. But then they shoot him. My dad, I mean. And then my brother. I hide behind the seat. Don't know what to do. The shooting stops. They open the truck. They find me. Put a bag over my head. Push me into some kind of vehicle. Truck unloads. There's maybe 100 of us, all together outside. A bunch of men with rifles. A guy tries running at them, gets cut down. We get packed into shipping container. Shipped to some forsaken lab in middle of nowhere. Pumped some kind of gas into the room. Everyone gets really woozy or passes out. Put into hospital rooms. Some kind of chemical cocktail keep us woozy and mostly immobile. Weeks pass. People slowly disappearing one by one. There's a long, hazy time. Kind of all ran together. Medical procedures. Doing basic tasks over and over. I remember opening a door repeatedly, but it felt wrong. Really, really wrong. I didn't figure out why until later. Next thing I know, someplace way different. Cold. Some kind of research facility in the distance. I get some kind of combat gear. A bunch of others get rifles. I don't. I get a big knife. A bunch of us start sprinting towards the entrance. There's a guy with a machine gun or something. Starts firing. Someone shoots machine gun guy. Everyone rushes in the entrance. Someone shoots machine gun guy. Everyone rushes in the entrance. More people with guns. More wounds. No deaths. Lots of being very close. My body stabbed someone 10 times. Not wildly even. Mechanical. Like this was something I did regularly. I see his face whenever I blink. It was a sad, panicked face. He was wearing a black suit, like he just walked out of a funeral. I don't think he was a soldier. He didn't even try to fight back. He just screamed. I hated it. Killing is bad. I didn't think anyone deserved to die for any reason. Even the people that killed my family. It was horrible what they did, but I have no right to punish. No more knife. My body rushes the shooting guy. Strangles him to death. He hits me, and hits me, and hits me. But my body doesn't let go. His face turns an ungodly shade of purple. And this continues for hours. At the end of the day, down maybe 10 of us, and a lot of us really badly wounded. Arms are missing, blood everywhere. Krags comes out. I try with every fiber in my being to move, but can't. She picks a handful of wounded ones, sticks some kind of shot in them. They drop, probably dead. After that, everything starts blurring together. More missions, more death, more wounds. I think it had something to do with when the chip broke, but there are a couple things burned into my memories. Like a highlight reel of the most horrible things I watched myself do. An old man impaled by his own cane. Something with a pregnant woman and a socket wrench. Lots of blood, and screaming, and crying, and sick crunching noises. They replay in my dreams. Don't worry about the mental health bits. I have it handled. I found a purpose. At some point, something snaps in my head. Chip probably burnt out. For the first time in months, maybe years, I have control. I try to move, then pass out. I think it was you guys that brought me here. Couple months of figuring out what doesn't hurt me, and here we are. K. Grimmer. Alright, thank you for speaking with us. You said you found a purpose earlier? What might that be? Yeah. I want to kill that demon Krags. I think some part of the implant still work. My body doesn't break. We were her playthings, not people. Toys to be taken apart and modified, put back together, broken, and smashed, just because she thought it was fun. Given all this, I want her dead too. Give me a gun and I will get her. Not even a gun. A knife. A pointy stick. A grenade. I won't ask questions. I can come straight back here. You can do whatever you want with me. Her still being alive is the only reason I haven't ended mine yet. Document 3033-K. Level 4 clearance required. Authenticated. On redacted date, E1261 escaped from captivity. E1261 complained of malfunctions in the nutritional dispenser present in her containment unit. After being provided sensory deprivation equipment and restraints, E1261 removed both and proceeded to attack staff. After neutralizing staff and escaping from her cell, she hijacked a regularly scheduled safe class anomaly transfer via transfer between Site and Site the location of Person of Interest 7701, as the transfer also included SCP no. Transport staff were instructed to comply. A video log was recovered. E1261 enters room with Person of Interest 7701. Hello, you bitch. Huh. I thought our moles were better than this. It took you 6 whole weeks to find me. Old CI could have done it in 2. Irrelevant. No one leaves the Chaos Insurgency. Incorrect. E1261 lunges at Person of Interest 7701, but stops just short of contact. E1261 is frozen in position. You thought you could use a weapon of my own creation to cut off this loose end? In some kind of absurd poetic justice? Quis imperat dominum ipsum. Who controls or commands the controllers? E1261 collapses. Okay, that actually is pretty funny, kinda. Person of Interest turns around and fails to notice E1261 beginning to twitch. What a mess. E1261 stands up, seizes a brown glass bottle from a nearby table, and lunges at Person of Interest 7701. Again, she stops short. Ooh, you almost had me there. You're quite the resilient one. I can't say they haven't made progress. Much finer control than I used to have. But I still can't get the speech to work with my setup. I guess that's the cost of using a subdermal implant rather than an in-brain one. E1261 begins crying. Ooh, can't control the emotional response either. A shame, too. These would have been a hell of a lot easier to use than the other control units. But we can't have a bunch of silent, crying flesh puppets. To be honest, I'm surprised you're still sane. A remarkable specimen. Hold still. As Person of Interest 7701 giggles and digs through a drawer, retrieving a field surgical kit. E1261 is unable to observe this. Oh, I haven't had the opportunity to examine any of you in a long time, and one drops right into my proverbial lap. What luck! Person of Interest 7701 begins a live standing vivisection of E1261, beginning at the brainstem. E1261 begins screaming. Hush you! It's hard to cut cleanly when you're screaming bloody murder. Vivisection occurs for 12 minutes, at which point E1261 collapses. Foundation security forces retrieve the VIP 4 minutes later. After the incident, E1260 was found to have asphyxiated due to a crushed windpipe. Autopsy reveals both 33031-1 and -2 style implants. E1261 was declared dead at the scene and cremated and interred in area per standard procedure. Person of interest was relocated to another housing area near site per the terms of the agreement. SCP-2715, also known as the Guilty Sister. Object Class: Euclid. Special Containment Procedures. SCP-2715 is to be kept in a low-security humanoid containment cell in Site-47. All vents leading to and from the subject's containment area are to be connected to an outdoor air supply. SCP-2715's meal schedule is not to be deviated from without the permission and approval of at least one Level 3 researcher assigned to the subject's containment unit. Site-47's on-site therapist is to be made available if needed. Description: SCP-2715 is an 18-year-old Brazilian-American female originating from Oregon. Subject displays a near-complete immunity to all types of biotoxic substances. Approximately 2 hours after ingestion of a biotoxin, SCP-2715 will begin sneezing uncontrollably, releasing the ingested biotoxin into the surrounding area in the form of airborne particles. Breathing the ejected particles will result in a strong negative reactions in line with those of the substance ingested, but notably more severe. Methods of inducing this reaction are limited to oral intake. Any other means of introduction, e.g. injection, will be processed normally by the subject's body and cause effect consistent with normal human intake of the substance. SCP-2715 came to the Foundation's attention after Gray, the son of the president of IC, contracted an illness during the 15th Les Amis Libres Gala in France. 2 days after the event, SCP-2715 sought out undercover Foundation personnel and admitted to having anomalous abilities that she used to carry out assassination. Further questioning revealed that she'd been operating in the service of the Chaos Insurgency for several years and wished to leave after insurgency agents threatened her family with data expunged when she refused to comply with their demands. SCP-2715 was taken into custody shortly thereafter and has since been cooperative in her containment. Addendum 2715-316 As of this date, SCP-2715's mother and sister have not been located. This information is not to be made available to SCP-2715 in order to maintain her emotional well-being. False information regarding 2715's capture has also been disseminated to insurgency operatives to discourage retaliation against extended relations. Addendum 2715-43 Since initial containment, SCP-2715 has consistently shown symptoms of post-traumatic stress. This is presumed to be a result of the subject's time with the Chaos Insurgency, though this has not been confirmed. Semi-regular appointments with Site-47's therapist are recommended. Journal excerpts 4/6 through 7/23. Dr. Phelps said that writing things down might help with the nightmares. It'll be like a letter, since I know he'll be reading it. I don't mind. The last time I had privacy, I was wearing Hello Kitty shirts and playing that stupid DS. It's weird, though. I've been feeling a lot better since they stuffed me into the cell. I don't have to worry about Erin or Sully. Assholes. Sully was the worst. She hated my guts from the moment I walked in there, even when I was normal. I think she thought of me as inferior or something. Inferior to her and the guys that had always been weird. Not modified, like me. Well, she can suck a dick. I'm safe, and she's the one who's being chewed out for letting me get captured. Bored to hell, half the time. Been trying out meditation, but I'm pretty bad at it. All I can think about is Mike's dumb face. Kinda defeats the point of meditation if you keep thinking about the person who threatened to condemn your family to a fate worse than death. But the more time I spend here, the more I think. And the more I think, the more I blame myself. It wasn't about money. It was about being dissatisfied. I was bored with real life. I wanted something else. Well, I got what I wanted, didn't I? I remember when I got out of surgery, I was walking around all weird. My mouth was dry from the cotton they stuffed it with so I wouldn't bite my tongue. But I was so excited. I'd become like a superhero. A tiny 12-year-old superhero. It was like being high. I've never been high, but I think that's what it'd be like. And it persisted, even after the anesthetic wore off, so I knew it was genuine. It was the best feeling I'd ever had, and I never want to experience anything like it ever again. The first man I killed was a political leader from Africa, about half a year after the surgery. They didn't give me any details, but I heard rumors he was getting fed up with the insurgency policy, so I downed my pills, lured him into his bathroom, and killed him. They put a new dictator in his place. One that agreed to do everything they wanted. Same shit, different day. They told me I was doing good. My mom always said that the most addictive drug is heroin, but it's not. The most addictive drug is superiority. They wanted me to kill some politician's son at the gala. I don't know why. Ray, I think his name was. He was 16. He died in his bed, with my head resting on his chest. I felt him go cold, got up, put on my bathrobe, and ran out into the ballroom screaming bloody murder. I practiced that. His mother looked like she'd been shot. I felt nothing, and that scared me. What do you tell yourself about after that? Oh, so sorry, you killed that guy who's done absolutely nothing to deserve it. Now, what about those tens of other corpses who were probably good people at heart? I locked those feelings away in favor of complete and utter apathy. Aaron found me in the courtyard when I was supposed to be at base. I had done a pretty good job of holding back my tears up until that point, but when I saw him, everything just started pouring out. He helped me get up and back to base. I thought he'd be understanding. I got called to Mike's office the day after. He always put on a neutral face when he was about to do something really awful. And he was staring at me, and I was staring at the sins reflected in those dark sunglasses. He asked me if I loved my sister. I told him that of course I did. He just looked at me. We both understood the threat. I don't know what I was thinking when I left. I was only taking a walk around base. I kept walking. I kept walking straight out the front doors, and the alarm sounded, and Aaron started running at me. I started running too. I kept running, even when Aaron had stopped, miles away. I stopped at a building. I'd seen that building before and was told to steer clear of it. Nobody ever told me why, but I started to understand when. I saw the phrase, Sally's Computer Products, plastered onto the window. I mean, I might not be the brightest knife in the shed, but nobody can miss a cue that big. I walked in and told the guy at the desk not to shoot me, and I guess things went from there. The researchers tell me Mom and Kelsey are alright. I hope it's true. SCP SCP-4452. Submitted to the Ethics Committee for review. Object Class: Thaumiel. Site Director approved. Ethics Committee denied. Author's Note: lots of potential in these SCP's drawings. Useful for info vaccines/weapons. I'll have the full potential for Thaumiel designation sent in by Thursday. Wanting to get this draft on the ethics desk ASAP. If ethics disagree, we can go Euclid instead. Revision number 1. SCP-4452. Object Class: Thaumiel. Special Containment Procedures. SCP-4452 is to be contained according to standard low-risk human anomaly security procedures, with blind site protocol in effect for relevant employees. SCP-4452 is to be provisioned with amenities and nourishment befitting a juvenile human with reduced mental capacity, along with a dose of mild sedative, 2 mg lorazepam, administered twice daily with meals. Should SCP-4452 become severely aggressive or agitated, a 1 mg emergency dose of haloperidol is to be administered by auto-injector. Blind site safety measures are to be maintained for staff assigned to routine upkeep and care for SCP-4452. Only completely blind staff or blindfolded staff who have taken sightless navigation training are to be allowed access to the containment cell. Any researchers who must interact visually with SCP-4452 are to be regularly inoculated with a Class 3 Helmsford-Shang info vaccine and tested on a daily basis for mimetic damage. SCP-4452 is to be provided with a notebook of drawing paper and a box of wax crayons in assorted colors. Completed notebooks are to be collected and prepared for further research according to standard fast-acting visual infohazard quarantine procedures. SCP-4452 is to be closely monitored for signs of brain infection until the cranioplasty plate has achieved sufficient integration with the skull around its trepanation site. Description: SCP-4452 is a juvenile male human, aged 11 years old. SCP-4452 displays no anomalous properties prior to Incident 4452-A, and was, in all physiological and psychological respects, a healthy human child. Due to its exposure to a weaponized infohazard and subsequent traumatic brain injury sustained in the course of Incident 4452-A, SCP-4452 now suffers from limited speech capabilities, poor voluntary muscle control, and extreme cognitive impairment. SCP-4452 typically reacts to instructions from Foundation staff with agitation, confusion, and irritability. At irregular intervals, SCP-4452 will attempt to produce drawings with any readily available media, though it displays a preference for felt-tip markers and wax crayons. While the majority of these drawings are unfocused, abstract shapes and lines, roughly 5% depict coherent, albeit crude, patterns and childlike motifs, centered around stick figure drawings of one or more humanoid shapes. Those notable drawings function as either visual infohazards or info-vaccines when viewed by an observer of varying potency. A selection of such drawings is listed below. Table 4452-1. Selected anomalous drawings produced by SCP-4452. Description of image: 2 humanoid stick figures positioned side by side with X marks in the place of eyes. Observer: 1 Class D test subject. Effects: subject viewed the image for 3 minutes. After an additional 15 minutes, subject experienced hemorrhaging of the tear ducts. Subject reported a severe headache with a sensation of intense pressure to the sides of the skull. Subject survived with moderate vision loss. Description of image: 2 humanoid stick figures in prone position, with X marks in place of eyes. Observer: 1 Class D test subject. Subject viewed the image for 2 minutes before experiencing hemorrhaging of the tear ducts. Subject was incapacitated by a severe headache for 4.5 hours. Upon recovery, subject described the experience as like his head was trying to pop. Subject survived with moderate vision loss. Description of drawing. One humanoid stick figure holding an indistinct shape drawn in yellow. Based on the context, it is believed to represent a cordless electric drill. See Incident Report 4452. 1 Class D subject as witness. Subject viewed the image for 5 seconds before reporting a brief, intense, piercing pain localized to the right temple. Subject was discovered to have temporarily gained a weak resistance to standard test info hazards, roughly equivalent to inoculation with a Class 1 Helmsford-Chang info vaccine. Subject survived with no ill effects. Description of next drawing. 2 humanoid stick figures with faces obscured by circles drawn in red. Test subject. 3 Class D subjects. Effects. Subjects reviewed the image for 30 seconds before experiencing severe hemorrhaging of the tear ducts and a ruptured cerebral aneurysm. Subjects did not survive. Description of image. 1 humanoid stick figure surrounded by a concentric blue circle and holding an indistinct yellow shape. Test subject. 1 Class D subject. Subject viewed the image for 30 seconds before reporting sensations of intense vertigo and agoraphobia, accompanied by a piercing pain on the right temple. Subject was discovered to have temporarily gained a moderate resistance to standard info hazards, roughly equivalent to inoculation with a Class 2 Helmsford-Chang info vaccine. Subject survived with no ill effects. Judging by the similarities between the images drawn by SCP-4452 and the circumstances of Incident 4452-A, it is hypothesized that the self-inflicted brain injury sustained by SCP-4452 functioned as a crude emergency treatment for exposure to a weaponized info hazard. While the exact mechanism of action is unknown, the brain structures through which the hazard will typically develop its lethal effects were destroyed, while its anomalous payload remained intact. As SCP-4452 is capable of producing images with both hazardous and protective effects, it is further speculated that SCP-4452 maintains some degree of control over the anomalous meme. Though mild sedation with lorazepam has proven to be moderately successful in rendering SCP-4452 more amenable to working with researchers, a general lack of cooperation with Foundation staff has thus far hindered thorough testing of this hypothesis. Incident Report 4452-A. Acquisition of SCP-4452 on July 27, 2021. At 4:43 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, the Foundation was put on high alert by a surge in encrypted chatter on channels known to be used by the Chaos Insurgency in the Rocky Mountains. 22 minutes later, the police scanners in the town of Brighton, Colorado, described massive casualties among EMTs and law enforcement, responding to the neighborhood reports of a commotion at a suburban home. Of note, there were no reports of any shots fired. MTF Lambda 4 was dispatched to the residence, arriving within 8 minutes. MTF Lambda 4 observed 4 known Chaos Insurgency infohazard terrorism operatives fleeing the area, all of whom were listed in the Terminate on-site dossier. A brief firefight ensued and the CI operatives were killed on the scene. There were no casualties among Foundation forces. Upon entering the building, MTF Lambda 4 encountered 10 deceased EMTs and police officers near the entrance, all of whom displayed significant hemorrhaging from the eyes. The homeowner was found similarly deceased in the kitchen. Progressing to the basement, SCP-4452 was discovered concealed beneath a blanket, comatose, gripping the handle of a cordless electric drill with a 1/4-inch diameter bit embedded in the chuck. After thorough analysis of the scene, it was inferred that SCP-4452 had used the drill to perforate its skull immediately after encountering a Chaos Insurgency info weapon. Life-saving measures by Foundation neurosurgeons was successful, and a cranioplasty was performed to implant a plate over the site of the self-trepanation. SCP-4452 has been medically stabilized and has a positive prognosis for long-term survivability. Its likelihood of regaining significant cognitive function, however, is still very low. Would you like to review the next site? Ethics Committee Review for SCP Database Entry. Document ECR 4452 Revision 1. Proposal status: denied. Ethics Committee Review. Inappropriate medical procedures, inappropriate object class designation, revise and resubmit for reconsideration. Suggested revisions, if applicable. Revisions to object class. Research and development of infoweapons and vaccines through the materials produced by 4452 is acceptable, but not sufficient reason to assign Thaumiel class. Please revise to Euclid. Revision to special containment procedures. Proposed heavy lorazepam dosage is inappropriate for juvenile human. Injected haloperidol for agitation and aggression is strongly discouraged for a child, especially with reduced mental capacity. Please consult with medical personnel for revising this section. Revisions to description, non-applicable. Revision to incident report, non-applicable. SCP-4452 Revision 2. Approved by the Site Director. Denied by the Ethics Committee. Author's note. Consulted with medical. They've cleared the new procedures. Unfortunately, lowering the dosage and delivery method makes containment much more difficult. New haloperidol formulation takes too long to take effect, and SCP-4452 has to be restrained until the meds have time to work. Lower lorazepam dose is not great. SCP-4452 is much less cooperative. Very hard to get good data anymore. Changes in blue. Unchanged blocks in gray. Only revisions will be said. SCP-4452. Object class, Euclid. With a mild sedative dose of 0.5 milligrams of lorazepam administered twice daily with meals. Should SCP-4452 become severely aggressive or agitated, a 0.5 milligram emergency dose of haloperidol is to be administered orally. If necessary, 4-point restraints may be employed to prevent SCP-4452 from harming staff or itself until the sedative has time to take effect. Description unchanged. New test result. 1 humanoid stick figure, drawn in red. Interlocked blank circles are drawn around the figure's wrists and ankles, inferred to represent chains or cuffs. Subject tested on: 3 Class D test subjects. Subjects experienced immediate hemorrhaging of the tear ducts, followed by near complete obliteration of ocular tissue. Subjects died of suffocation shortly thereafter, due to sustained tonic contraction of the diaphragm during rigid paralysis. As SCP-4452 is capable of producing images with both hazardous and protective effects, it is further speculated that SCP-4452 maintains some degree control over the anomalous meme. Mild sedation with lorazepam has very limited effect in rendering SCP-4452 more amenable with working with researchers. Ethics Committee Review 2. Ethics Committee Review for SCP Database Entry. Document ECR 4452, Revision 2. Proposal status: denied. Suboptimal containment procedures. Revise and resubmit for consideration. Suggested revisions, if applicable. Revision to object class, not applicable. Revision to special containment procedures. Chemical sedation of SCP-4452 is not recommended. In place of lorazepam and haloperidol, SCP-4452 should be given unfettered access to the contents of Package 4452-1, currently en route via interdepartmental mail, tracking number S19-134937-512A. Revision to description, non-applicable. Revisions to incident report, non-applicable. SCP-4452 Revision 3. Site Director, approved. Ethics Committee, approved. Author's notes. Apologies for doubting. New containment procedures is remarkably effective. SCP-4452 hasn't had a single bad episode, even without the lorazepam haloperidol. Note that SCP's behavior has significantly changed since we implemented the new procedures, and the description has been modified. Revision number 3. Object Class, Euclid. Item Number, SCP-4452. SCP-4452 is to be contained according to standard low-risk human anomaly security procedures, with blind site protocol in effect for relevant employees. SCP-4452 is to be provisioned with amenities and nourishment befitting a juvenile human with reduced mental capacity. In addition, a blue cotton blanket is to be kept in the anomaly's containment cell. SCP-4452 habitually hides under the blanket when agitated or emotionally distraught. This behavior is normal and should not be discouraged. Blind site safety measures are to be maintained for staff assigned to routine upkeep and care of SCP-4452. Any researchers who must interact visually with SCP-4452 are to be inoculated with a Class 3 Helmsford-Chang info vaccine and tested on a daily basis for memetic damage. SCP-4452 is to be provided with a notebook of drawing paper and a box of wax crowns in assorted colors. Completed notebooks are to be collected and prepared for further research according to standard, fast-acting visual info hazard quarantine procedures. SCP-4452 is to be closely monitored for signs of brain infection until its cranioplasty plate has achieved significant integration with the skull around its trepanation site. Description: SCP-4452 is a juvenile male human, aged 11 years old. SCP-4452 displayed no anomalous properties prior to Incident 4452-A and was in all physiological and psychological respects a healthy human child. Due to its exposure to a weaponized info hazard and a subsequent traumatic brain injury sustained in the course of Incident 4452-A, SCP-4452 now suffers from limited speech capabilities, poor voluntary muscle control, and extreme cognitive impairment. Removed site. SCP-4452 typically reacts to instructions from Foundation staff with agitation, confusion, and irritability. At irregular intervals, SCP-4452 will attempt to produce drawings with any readily available media, though it displays a preference for felt-tip markers and wax crayons. While the majority of these drawings are unfocused abstract shapes and lines, roughly 5% depict coherent, albeit crude, patterns and childlike motifs centered around stick figure drawings of one or more humanoid shapes. These notable drawings function as either visual info hazard, as only extremely potent info vaccines, when viewed by an observer. A selection of such drawings is listed below. Description of image. One humanoid stick figure surrounded by a series of concentric blue circles. One Class D subject as observer. Effects. Subject viewed the image for 8 minutes before describing a feeling of intense warmth. Subject was discovered to have gained a strong resistance to standard test info hazards, roughly equivalent to inoculation with a Class 3 Helmsford-Chang info vaccine. Subject survived with no ill effects. Description of image. 3 humanoid stick figures surrounded by a series of concentric blue circles. Observer. 3 Class D test subjects. Subject viewed the image for 6 minutes before describing feelings of intense warmth. Subjects were discovered to have gained a strong resistance to test info hazards, roughly equivalent to inoculation with experimental Class 4 Helmsford-Yang info vaccines still in development. Subject survived with no ill effects. Description of image. 3 humanoid stick figures surrounded by a series of concentric blue circles. The figures are depicted in a configuration that suggests they may have held each other's hands. Observer. 1. Class D test subject. Subject viewed the image for 5 minutes before describing a feeling of mild warmth. Subject was discovered to have gained an unprecedented level of strong resistance to test info hazards. Of note, the subject survived direct prolonged observation of a Barry Langford instant kill visual meme for 6 minutes before succumbing to its effects. SCP-4452 has, in the past, produced info-hazardous drawings as well as info-protective artwork. However, at present time, SCP-4452 demonstrates an unwillingness to produce harmful images. Accordingly, further research and study of SCP-4452 is to be directed at refining, improving, and reverse engineering the properties of the highly effective info vaccines it created. Redacted subjects. As of SCP-4452 is capable of producing images with both hazardous and protective effects, it is further speculated that SCP-4452 maintains some degree of control over the anomalous meme. Mild sedation with lorazepam has a very limited effect in rendering SCP-4452 more amenable to working with the researchers. A general lack of cooperation with Foundation staff has thus far hindered throughout the testing of this hypothesis. New paragraph. SCP-4452 is generally cooperative with researchers. When distressed, SCP-4452 will often hide underneath its cotton blanket for 30 to 60 minutes. This behavior is extremely effective in reducing acute anxiety in the anomaly, and it will usually render SCP-4452 amenable to interacting with the Foundation staff. In addition, the day-to-day demeanor of SCP-4452 is improved by the simple presence of the blanket within line of sight. At present time, the anomaly rarely exhibits irritability or aggressive behavior. It often expresses joy and excitement while drawing. Incident report, unchanged. Supplementary material. Ethics Committee Clearance 5 required. For Ethics Committee eyes only. Level E5 clearance required for access. Level O5 clearance may be accepted on a case-by-case basis by petition to the Ethics Committee. Please present your Level E5 credentials. Access granted. Disclosure of conflict of interest. Ethics Committee 5-3. Ethics Committee member E53 voluntarily recused herself from discussion regarding SCP-4452 after declaring a conflict of interest. By unanimous agreement of the remainder of the Ethics Committee, a one-time exception to her recusal was granted. At her suggestion, containment procedures for SCP-4452 were modified to allow the anomaly access to a blue cotton blanket. According to E5-3, SCP-4452 had previously been in the habit of carrying a similar blanket for comfort and security, purchased by her husband at the time of the anomaly's birth. Note, her husband is deceased. See Incident Report 4452-A. Thank you for listening, and you have a good rest of your night.